My daughter looked me in the eye and said, "This room is for the dog. You can sleep in the basement." I didn't argue. I didn't even look surprised. I just took the blanket she handed me and went downstairs without a word. She thought I was just her aging father, desperate for a place to stay, someone she could ignore, humiliate, and move like old furniture. She had no idea the house was mine. Or that 4 weeks later, when the landlord came knocking, it would be me. You won't believe what happened next. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. The blanket she gave me smelled like dog fur. She'd folded it neatly, like that was supposed to soften the message. Murphy, her golden retriever, already sprawled across the guest bed like a king. The room used to be hers when she was a little girl. I'd built the closet with my bare hands, painted the walls pale lavender because she once said it was the color of princesses. Now it had become a dog suite. Orthopedic bed, automatic feeder, framed quote on the wall that read, "Dogs are family." And apparently, fathers weren't. I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than I should have, taking it in. She didn't even meet my eyes when she said it. "The basement's got heat. You'll be fine down there." Her voice was flat, dismissive, like she was doing me a favor. No mention of the fact I had just paid her property taxes in full last month, or that I was the one who stocked her fridge that morning with $180 worth of groceries, or that I'd babysat her daughter every weekend for the last 3 months while she went to wine tasting events with friends I'd never met. I walked past her in silence, carrying my suitcase and the blanket like a man being transferred, not welcomed. The basement light flickered as I stepped down. The smell of old detergent and concrete hit me. Cold air curled at my ankles. She hadn't even put a sheet on the couch. Just a few throw pillows, one of which still had crumbs from the last time her daughter had a sleepover down there. I laid the blanket down and sat for a long while, staring at the exposed beams above me. The same beams I'd reinforced when I'd paid to have her washer and dryer installed. She never knew that I paid for that upgrade in cash, just so she wouldn't have to deal with credit card interest. She thought the bank had given her a deal. She thought a lot of things. Upstairs, I could hear Murphy's nails clicking across the hardwood. Then laughter, hers, muffled through the ceiling. Probably watching her shows with a glass of wine in hand, completely unaware of how small her world had become. I didn't feel angry, just quiet, just hollow. That kind of silence a man carries when he realizes the thing he's spent his life building no longer recognizes him. I remembered the night her mother and I brought her home from the hospital. We wrapped her in a yellow blanket. She barely made a sound. That same silence, peaceful, trusting, was what I carried with me as I stared at the unpainted walls of the basement that night. 4 weeks earlier, she called me crying, said she needed help, said everything was slipping, said she'd been laid off, that her unemployment hadn't kicked in and she couldn't cover the bills. She didn't ask directly. She never did. She just hinted. "I don't know how we're going to make rent this month, Dad." That's all she had to say. I moved in the next day, brought my savings, canceled my plans to move to Arizona for retirement. She'd promised it would just be a couple months, just until she got back on her feet. That was 3 years ago. And in those 3 years, I'd quietly become the bank, the babysitter, the handyman, the invisible scaffolding holding her life together. I never asked for thanks. I never asked for recognition. But I also never expected to be told that the guest room was now the dog's room, and that I was being downgraded to the basement like forgotten furniture. The next morning, I made coffee before she woke up. I didn't touch her fancy grounds, just brewed my instant mix and drank it from an old mug I kept in my suitcase. Upstairs, she wandered into the kitchen wearing a robe and scrolled through her phone. "Can you walk, Murphy?" she said. "No. Good morning." "No. Did you sleep okay?" I nodded and took the leash. Murphy wagged his tail and bounced at my feet. At least someone was happy to see me. We walked the block in silence. The air was crisp. My fingers ached from the cold, but my mind was sharp. When we came back, she had already left for a brunch meeting. No note, no text, just a sink full of dishes. Her daughter was still asleep in her room. I cleaned the kitchen, took out the trash, started a load of laundry. Then I went back down to the basement and opened the manila envelope I kept at the bottom of my suitcase. Inside were copies of the mortgage deed, tax filings, and utility accounts. All still in my name. The house was mine. Had been since she defaulted on her mortgage 5 years ago. She begged me to save it, so I bought it outright and let her stay. No rent, no terms, just trust. I kept paying the bills in silence because I thought that's what fathers do. I never updated her on the paperwork. She never asked. And I never reminded her. Until that night. The night she told me the dog gets the room and I get the floor. That night changed everything. I looked over the documents with fresh eyes. Not as a father, but as a man watching someone abuse the kindness they no longer deserved. She wasn't just ungrateful. She was entitled. And entitlement, when left unchecked, always grows into cruelty. I called my attorney that afternoon, told him I wanted to draft a formal lease agreement. Nothing aggressive, just legal, just professional. "She's your daughter," he said. "Exactly," I replied. "Which is why I've let it go on this long. But I won't let it go further." We drafted the notice quietly. 30 days. No rent paid? Termination of tenancy. I didn't post it yet. I waited. I waited for the moment her illusion cracked. When she'd lose her job. When the bills would return unopened. When the fridge stayed empty and the dog food ran out. When her eyes would finally rise to meet mine, and she'd see not her father, but the man who held the deed. The man she pushed into the basement. The man who never stopped keeping receipts. I didn't say anything when she forgot my birthday. That week, I'd unclogged her bathroom sink, changed the oil in her car, and taken her daughter to school every morning so she could sleep in after staying out late with friends. I didn't expect a cake or a party. I didn't even expect a card. But something inside me cracked a little when I saw her Instagram story. Not a word about her father, but a boomerang of Murphy wearing a glittery birthday hat, captioned, "My favorite boy turns 4 today." 4. That dog got a post. I didn't get a glance. I sat in the basement that night, holding a plastic fork and a microwaved tray of lasagna, listening to her laugh upstairs as if I didn't exist. I didn't tell her I'd bought that lasagna, or that I'd noticed she had taken the last few $20 bills from my coat pocket the day before. I just turned on the small TV I kept down there, a 12-inch screen with no remote, and watched whatever channel came through the fuzzy antenna. It was a rerun of an old Western, a father trying to protect his land, his family betraying him one by one. I turned the volume up and stared at the wall while the credits rolled. I didn't sleep that night. Again. It wasn't the cold. It was something deeper, a gnawing awareness that I'd allowed myself to become furniture in my own bloodline. Useful, sturdy, silent, forgotten. The next morning, she asked if I could pick up her daughter from school. I said yes, as always. She didn't ask how I was feeling. She didn't notice that I was limping from the ladder I'd fallen off the day before while fixing a loose shingle on her roof. She just handed me the keys and said, "Be quick, she has ballet at 4. I drove in silence. My granddaughter hugged me when I arrived, like she always did. At 7 years old, she still saw me, still looked me in the eyes and smiled without expectation. When she got into the car, she asked why I always wore the same coat. I laughed and told her it was warm. She said I should buy a new one, something red, her favorite color. I told her maybe someday. But the truth was, I hadn't bought anything for myself in almost a year. Every dollar I had went into this house. Her mother didn't know that the credit card she used was still under my name, that I'd been paying the balance quietly each month to keep her from defaulting, that I had cashed out part of my retirement to cover her plumbing repairs, that the fridge that now held her oat milk and imported cheese had been purchased on a loan that was eating up $147 a month, and I hadn't told a soul. Later that night, she asked me if I could take Murphy to the vet in the morning. "He's got allergies again," she said, "and I just don't have time. Plus, the vet likes you." The vet liked me because I always paid in cash. I didn't mention that. I just nodded and said I'd be up early. She handed me a list of supplements, special shampoo, and a dental treatment, all printed neatly in color. No one had ever made me a list like that. I picked it up and tucked it in my back pocket. When she left the room, I stood at the kitchen island and stared at the 3 wine bottles on the counter. Empty. Imported. Expensive. I glanced at the cabinet above the fridge. I knew the box where she kept the cash. Not much. Mostly tips from her weekend hostess shifts at the golf club. but enough for takeout. I didn't take any. I didn't say anything. I just looked at Murphy, who was now curled up on the guest bed, drooling in his sleep. The sheets were Egyptian cotton. I remembered, because I'd bought them. She said the old ones didn't match the paint. I paid $189 at the store that day. Now they smelled like a dog. That night in the basement, I took out the documents again. Not to gloat. Just to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That I hadn't imagined the years of sacrifice. The 3 a.m. calls when her marriage was falling apart. The loan I took against my truck to get her out of credit card debt. The nights I sat by her side in the hospital when she had that cyst scare. The time I gave her my winter coat and walked home in the snow because she'd forgotten hers. And all of that was fine. Truly. I would have done it again. If not for the way she had started to look through me like I was an appliance. If not for the way she'd once said, when talking to her friend on speakerphone, "Yeah, he's just kind of here, like a roommate, but older." That one stuck. A roommate, but older. That night, I opened my bank app and transferred the last bit of cash I had into my savings account. I knew what was coming. She didn't. The vet appointment was $213. I paid in cash. She didn't ask. Just took the bag and said, "Oh, they gave you the good stuff. Thanks." Then she handed me a broom and asked if I could clean up the patio. "Some of the neighbors might come by later," she said. I swept the patio for an hour. My back ached. My legs burned. I didn't ask who the neighbors were. I wasn't invited. That night, I heard them laughing through the kitchen window. I sat in the basement and wrote out every transaction from the past 12 months. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it for clarity, to remind myself who I'd become. There were 182 line items: groceries, vet visits, school supplies, utility bills, car repairs, mortgage payments, property taxes, streaming subscriptions, Amazon deliveries. I highlighted the ones she'd never acknowledged. Almost all of them. I saved the list in a folder marked Endgame. I didn't know yet how I'd use it, but I knew this much. When she looked at me and said, "This room is for the dog," she crossed a line she didn't even know existed. A quiet kind of line. One that separates fathers from fools. The next morning, she asked if I could watch her daughter for a weekend while she went to Palm Springs with a friend. I nodded. No questions, no judgment, just the usual agreement. I made pancakes that Saturday morning. We played board games. She drew me a picture of the three of us, me, her, and Murphy, under a rainbow. "I didn't draw Mommy because she's busy," she said. I smiled and said that was okay. I pinned the drawing to the basement wall with tape. A small reminder that one of them still saw me, that one of them still cared. That night, I folded the blanket on the basement couch as neatly as I could, smoothed the corners, adjusted the pillows, and then, for the first time, I allowed myself to feel it. Not anger, not bitterness, but resolve. Because it wasn't just about the bed, or the dog, or the basement. It was about the fact that somewhere along the way, she stopped seeing me as her father, and started seeing me as something she could use. That's when I knew. When the moment came, I wouldn't raise my voice. I wouldn't slam doors. I would do what I always did. Quietly, methodically, completely. By the third week of living in the basement, I began to notice the shift. Not in me. That shift had already occurred the night she pointed toward the stairs. But in her. It wasn't enough that I had become the invisible man beneath her feet. It was as if she needed to make sure I knew my place daily, through little comments she didn't think I heard, and small omissions that told me I didn't belong. When guests came over, she referred to the house as hers, and when I'd walk into the kitchen mid-conversation, she'd gesture casually and say, "Oh, that's just my dad. He's staying with us for a while." The words "just" and "staying" carried so much weight, even though they were said lightly. The woman who once ran to me crying after her first heartbreak now spoke to me like I was an extra in the background of her carefully curated life. That Saturday afternoon, she hosted a book club on the patio. I'd spent the morning setting out chairs, sweeping leaves, and stringing up the fairy lights she said made the backyard Instagram-worthy. I even drove to the store to buy the lemonade she liked. Not the store brand, the expensive one with the glass bottle. She didn't ask. I just did it. When the guests arrived, I stayed out of the way. I knew the routine by then. She didn't want me seen. I kept to the kitchen, cleaned the floors, folded laundry. I heard laughter outside, clinking glasses. One of them said, "It must be nice owning a place like this at your age." And she responded with a giggle and said, "Yeah, well, I got lucky. Right place, right time." Not a word about who paid the taxes. Not a word about the man folding towels in the other room who signed the loan papers, covered the repairs, and spent half his pension to make sure this roof never leaked. I didn't flinch. I didn't even pause. I just kept folding. When the party ended, she came inside with a stack of dishes. "Can you take care of these? I'm exhausted." I nodded and turned on the faucet. The silence of the running water gave me time to breathe. That night, when her daughter came down to say goodnight, she hugged me and asked if I'd ever been a real superhero. I asked her what she meant. "You fix everything," she said. I smiled. The kind of smile you give when someone wounds you with sweetness. I told her I wasn't a superhero, just a grandpa who knew how to use a wrench. She said I was better than a wrench. She said I was like a hammer that doesn't yell. I don't know why that broke me, but it did. After she went back upstairs, I sat on the couch for a long time, staring at the wall, staring through time. I remembered my daughter at the same age, small, curious, always tugging at my sleeve and asking how things worked. She'd once told her teacher I could fix anything, that my hands were magic. And now, those same hands washed her dishes while she scrolled through her phone and pretended I was a ghost. I never wanted thanks, never needed applause. But respect? Respect wasn't too much to ask. I wrote another line on my ledger that night. Book club, 3 hours, set up and clean up, $84 in supplies. Not because I planned to charge her, but because I needed to see it. I needed to see in black and white how far I'd allowed this to go. On Monday, the utility bill came. Late again. I paid it. No one said a word. On Wednesday, her car battery died in the Trader Joe's parking lot. She called me. Not AAA, not a friend. Me. I drove 18 minutes in traffic, jump-started the car, and followed her home just in case. She didn't roll down the window to say thank you. She just waved once and drove into the garage. The next morning, she asked if I could pick up a few things from the store. You know, while you're out doing your daily grandpa loop. Daily grandpa loop. That's what she called my life now. Grocery store, school pickup, Murphy's dog park, pharmacy, laundry. I was her full-time unpaid assistant, and apparently it was adorable. That day at the grocery store, I saw a couple, maybe late 60s, walking hand in hand. The woman touched the man's shoulder and said something, and they both laughed. It reminded me of how Maria used to stand beside me when we shopped. We'd always split the list. She'd always sneak snacks into the cart when I wasn't looking. I reached into my coat pocket and found a note I'd written months ago. Just a scribble that said, "Visit Maria's grave," and the date circled in red. I'd missed it. Again. My daughter never asked about her mother anymore. She never once said, "You doing okay, Dad?" Even when she saw me staring at the old photo of the three of us in the hallway. She'd once told her therapist I was emotionally distant, that I had trouble expressing affection, and yet I was the one doing the emotional labor now, holding her household together, keeping everything from collapsing while she slept in past 10 and told people she was between careers. The next week, the school called. Her daughter had forgotten her lunch again. I packed one, drove it over, and waited in the car until lunchtime. I watched from a distance as she walked in through the front gate. She looked back once and waved. It was the only wave I'd gotten all week. When I came home that afternoon, my daughter was on a Zoom call. She mouthed, "Quiet," and held up a hand. I nodded and went downstairs. An hour later, she came down and said, "You left the back gate open. Murphy got out." I told her I hadn't used the gate. She said, "Well, someone did. Be more careful." No apology. No thanks when I went out looking. Just blame. Always blame. That night, I opened the file folder again, added a new tab. Incidents. Not financial, just moments. Moments that chipped away at what little remained of our bond. Not because I wanted revenge, not yet, but because I needed a map. A map of how I got here. A map of how a father becomes a tenant in the home he owns. A map of how the girl who once held my hand at the fair became the woman who tossed me a blanket and said, "Downstairs." I started checking job boards that night. Not for myself, for her. I wanted to know what she wasn't applying for. The results were bleak. She hadn't updated her resume, hadn't responded to interview requests, but she kept telling friends on Facebook she was working on something big, that she was about to launch something new. I saw the posts. I read the comments. Everyone cheered her on. "So proud of you. Boss babe vibes. Take your time, queen." I watched the likes roll in while I paid the internet bill they were using to post. And still, I said nothing. Because what do you say to someone who's already decided you're just furniture with a heartbeat? You don't lecture. You don't shout. You wait. You wait until the moment their fantasy collides with your reality, and you let the truth speak for itself. The following Friday, she forgot to pick up her daughter from school. Again. The secretary recognized me when I walked through the office doors. "You're her grandfather, right?" she said. "She's been waiting a while." I nodded, gave her my best smile, and took my granddaughter's hand. We walked home in silence for a few blocks until she asked, "Why doesn't Mommy remember me sometimes?" I stopped walking for a second. I crouched beside her, tied her shoelace, and said, "Sometimes adults get busy with hard things, but it's not your fault." She looked at me for a moment, then reached into her backpack and pulled out a drawing. A crayon picture of a house, a dog, and 3 stick figures. She pointed to the smallest one and said, "That's Murphy." Then the tall one. "That's me." Then she paused, tapping the 3rd figure with the blue scribbled sweater. "That's you. I didn't draw Mommy. She's always gone." I kept that paper. Still have it. Taped to the back of a document I was drafting that night. A declaration of tenancy for her. I didn't plan to serve it. Not yet. But I needed to be ready. I needed something to exist that could remind her, even if just for a moment, that the ground beneath her feet was not hers by right. It was borrowed, gifted, protected, and easily reclaimed. That weekend, she left town again. "There's a wine retreat in Sonoma," she said. "It's networking, real clients this time." She didn't ask if I could stay home with her daughter. She just assumed I would. I cooked. I cleaned. I washed Murphy's bedding because no one else had. I didn't use the washing machine in the basement. The spin cycle was busted, so I hauled it upstairs, scrubbed it by hand, and dried it outside in the cold air. Her daughter helped me hang the sheets. She asked me if I ever got tired. I said sometimes. She said, "You're still strong." And that meant more to me than anything her mother had said in months. On Sunday evening, my daughter returned with new sunglasses, a fresh spray tan, and a bag full of boutique snacks. "I brought you something," she said, tossing me a bag of caramel popcorn. "Thanks for holding it down." I looked at the bag. $8.95 price tag still on it. I had spent over $120 that weekend on groceries, school supplies, gas, and cleaning supplies, and I got a bag of popcorn. She walked past me into the kitchen and popped open a bottle of white wine. The good kind. The one I used to save for anniversaries. She didn't ask. Just poured a glass and turned on the speaker system I installed myself 2 years earlier. "This house has good bones," she said to no one in particular. I wrote that quote down in my ledger. I wrote it under a list of things she didn't realize weren't hers. The HVAC I paid to replace. The water heater I had installed. The gutters I climbed up to clear during last fall's storm while she slept through the thunder. All those good bones had my fingerprints in them. The next morning, I walked past the living room and saw her on the phone. She was pacing, animated. I overheard her say, "Worst case, I can always Airbnb the place if things get tight. I'll just have to figure out what to do with my dad. Maybe send him back to his place or something." My place. I didn't have a place anymore. I gave it up to help her keep this one. I gave it up because she said she was drowning. Because she said she needed time. Because I was stupid enough to believe that family meant something permanent. That night, I opened the file again, added 2 new documents, a formal rental agreement and an eviction notice. Both were drafts. Both were dated but unsigned. I wasn't ready yet, but I was getting close. I knew her routine now. She slept late, lied to friends about job interviews, kept up appearances on Instagram, and drank wine in the evenings while texting men whose names changed every few weeks. She was building nothing, just drifting, rearranging distractions to look like purpose. And every time something cracked, a pipe, a bill, a school pickup, she tossed it to me like laundry and moved on. When I was younger, I thought being a father meant absorbing pain, holding the world up while others walked across it. I still believe that. But I also believe there's a line, a point where protection becomes permission. And I had allowed her to believe that cruelty, masked as forgetfulness, was tolerable. That ungratefulness, disguised as independence, was acceptable. I had taught her that no matter how she acted, the bills would be paid, the fridge would be full, the lights would stay on. I had taught her that I would never leave. And she was using that lesson like a weapon. Later that week, she threw a birthday party for Murphy. I wish I were joking. She invited 6 women, hired a mobile pet bakery, and had balloons printed with the dog's face on them. She spent $400 on that party. I know because I saw the receipts. She didn't invite me. I was told to stay downstairs during the event to avoid weird vibes. Her words. Weird vibes. I walked outside that morning and trimmed the hedges, cleaned the walkway, made sure the patio furniture didn't wobble. Then I went inside, washed my hands, and made myself a sandwich. I ate it in the basement. I could hear them laughing through the vents. At one point, someone said, "It must be nice to just chill at home all day and have your dad do everything." They laughed. My daughter didn't correct them. I added that quote to my ledger, too. On Saturday, her internet went out. She screamed from the living room, "Dad, what did you do to the Wi-Fi?" I hadn't touched it. I walked upstairs, unplugged the router, waited 30 seconds, and restarted it. When the light turned green, she said, "Finally. Ugh, I have a webinar I'm hosting. Don't touch anything else today, please." I nodded, went back downstairs. Later, she told her Instagram followers that she was grateful for a supportive community of women who keep her going. Not a mention of the man who fixed her internet, paid her mortgage, made her child's lunch, and stood in the shadows while she played queen of a borrowed kingdom. That Sunday, I took a walk through the neighborhood, just to breathe. I saw a "for rent" sign go up on a small duplex around the corner. I took a photo. Not because I needed it, because she might, sooner than she thought. When I returned home, her daughter ran to the door. She hugged me and said, "Mommy says you're gonna move soon." I froze. She said you're gonna get tired of helping us. I smiled softly. Did she say that? She says you'll go live with the other old people in Arizona. I crouched down, tied her shoe, and said, "Maybe. But not yet." That night, I opened my laptop and updated the notice to vacate. I didn't print it, but I saved it to the desktop. I renamed the folder from Endgame to Exit. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was preparing. Preparing for the moment when silence would speak louder than all the years of yeses and nods and forgotten birthdays. I wasn't her father anymore, not in her eyes. I was her fixture, her utility, her fallback plan. And like all utilities, I had a shutoff date. The following week began like most, with her complaints. On Monday morning, she accused me of leaving the kitchen dirty. I had washed every dish, wiped every counter, and mopped the floor before bed. But she stormed into the basement, threw a towel at me, and said, "There's grease all over the backsplash. Please clean up after yourself, Dad." I stood there, towel in hand, staring at a spotless wall, wondering what kind of delusion made someone invent messes just to assert dominance. I didn't argue. I walked upstairs, wiped it again, and returned to the basement. That afternoon, I found her in the dining room with her laptop, surrounded by swatches of fabric and a Pinterest board full of living room decor ideas. "I'm thinking of redecorating," she said. "Maybe something minimalist, less of this old man aesthetic." She didn't ask what I thought. She didn't care that the rug beneath her feet was a wedding gift from her mother, or that the wooden dining table she was leaning on was hand-carved by my own father. To her, it was all clutter. Things to be replaced for the aesthetic she was building on social media. Things with memories were useless to someone trying to erase who she used to be. The next day, she ordered a new couch. White boucle. Expensive. Delivery fee alone was $70. I helped the movers carry it in. She didn't say thank you. Just told me to Be careful with the legs. She moved the old couch to the curb and posted a story that said, clearing space for better energy. I saved that too. My ledger was digital now. Quotes, receipts, date-stamped photos. Her digital footprint was evidence she didn't even know she was leaving. That night, her daughter asked if I'd ever had a favorite chair. I pointed to the one on the curb. That used to be it. She asked why I didn't keep it. I said, sometimes we outgrow things. She tilted her head and said, but it still fits you. I didn't reply. I just tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and turned off the light. Wednesday brought another wine night, this time with 2 friends. They brought charcuterie, laughed about exes, and took turns sitting in the new couch throne. I was in the basement trying to sleep when I heard the word tenant come through the vent. One of them said, wait, your dad lives here? Isn't that weird? She replied, he's basically like a tenant. Doesn't pay rent, but he keeps the place running. It's kind of perfect, honestly. I didn't flinch. I just wrote it down. Tenant. That was the 3rd time she'd used that word in a month. Not father, not provider, not even guest. Tenant. I was a fixture again. A placeholder. And placeholders can be replaced. On Thursday, she asked me to move some boxes out of the attic. They're from my college years, she said. Don't want Murphy getting into them. I climbed the ladder. I found boxes filled with my wife's cookbooks, our wedding album, and framed photos she had removed from the hallway. The same hallway now lined with abstract art she claimed reflected her journey. I carried the boxes down and asked where to put them. She pointed to the garage. Just stack them near the back wall. I'll sort them later. She never did. 2 days later, I found the wedding album half soaked in rainwater. The garage door hadn't been fully shut. Pages warped, photos blurred. I salvaged what I could, pressed the dry ones between books. The rest I dried with a towel. No apology came. No recognition that she had discarded history for convenience. She wasn't malicious. She was just hollow. So busy trying to become something else that she forgot what made her real in the first place. On Friday, the water bill arrived. I opened it. $143, higher than usual. I checked the usage history. She had taken 6 baths that week. Long ones. The kind where the water heater kicked on multiple times. I thought about my own showers. 2 minutes, lukewarm, in the basement with the rattling pipes. I paid the bill, as always. I marked it in the ledger, and I wondered what she'd do if I ever stopped. That night, Murphy asked if I believed in magic. I asked her why. She said, because Mommy says you make things happen. Like the fridge is always full and the car always works and the school lunches always show up. I smiled. That's not magic, I said. That's love. She nodded. I think they're the same. That answer stayed with me. Love that looked like magic. Magic that looked like responsibility. Responsibility that no one thanked. On Saturday, a pipe burst behind the dishwasher. Water seeped across the kitchen tiles. She panicked, called her friend, and shouted, I don't have time for this. Then she screamed, Dad! I was already upstairs, tool bag in hand. It took me 2 hours. I shut off the water, removed the panel, cut the pipe, replaced the section, sealed the joint, and tested the line. When I was done, she was gone. I found a note on the counter. Had to meet Trina. Thanks for fixing it. There's leftover Thai in the fridge. I didn't eat it. I wasn't hungry. I was tired. Tired of being the background crew in a play I never auditioned for. Tired of being the scaffolding for someone else's performance. That night, I printed the rental agreement, signed it, dated it, placed it in an envelope. I didn't seal it, but I placed it in the drawer with the others. 1 drawer, 4 envelopes, each with a name. Heron, her daughters, mine. And the 4th, blank. Reserved for the one who'd eventually ask, how did this happen? The next morning, she asked if I could take Murphy to her ballet class. I've got a yoga collab thing, she said. It's kind of important. I said yes, drove her, waited in the car, watched through the glass as she danced in a room full of mirrors. At one point, she caught my reflection, waved, smiled. I waved back, and I thought, she's the only one in this house who still sees me, the real me. Not the servant, not the tenant, not the broken man holding together the bones of a crumbling family. Just me, Grandpa. That was almost enough to keep me there. Almost. By the second week of December, the tension had turned into routine. She no longer felt the need to explain her absences or justify her insults. They came like the morning news, regular, unfiltered, and expected. Monday morning began with her handing me a list. Not a to-do list, not a request, a directive. Groceries, pick up Murphy from dance, clean the upstairs windows, and don't forget the recycling, she said as she passed the hallway without looking at me. I stood there, paper in hand, staring at the checkboxes. Not a single please, not a single word of acknowledgement that I was her father, not her housekeeper. But I said nothing. I did everything on the list. Quietly. Precisely. Like I had been trained. And maybe I had. Maybe years of providing, fixing, and putting others first had conditioned me to absorb this treatment like a sponge in water, silently expanding with every drop, waiting for the moment I'd be wrung dry. On Tuesday, she had a photo shoot scheduled in the backyard. She texted me at 6 a.m., asking if I could please be out of the frame by 9. I didn't ask what it was for. I just made sure the hedges were trimmed, the lawn was clean, and the patio chairs were rearranged the way she liked. Diagonally, not parallel, because angles are aesthetic. She emerged from the back door in a cream jumpsuit and heels, holding a cold brew in one hand and a phone in the other, already speaking into the camera about how hard she worked to create this peaceful space. I stood behind the curtain, just out of frame, watching as she performed gratitude for strangers she'd never meet. Not once did she mention the man who painted that fence, mowed that lawn, or raked those leaves. I didn't expect her to. But some small part of me, even then, still hoped. Wednesday afternoon, Murphy came home with a school project. She needed help constructing a diorama of a coral reef. Her mother was on deadline for an influencer campaign, so I volunteered. We spent 3 hours gluing, painting, cutting tiny fish out of foil. She smiled the entire time. "You make everything better, Grandpa," she said. I smiled. I didn't speak. At dinner that night, Murphy showed her mom the project. "Did you thank Grandpa?" she asked. Murphy nodded. "He's the best." My daughter blinked slowly, then said, "Just don't make a mess." It was always the same script. Praise dismissed, effort diminished, existence tolerated. On Thursday, a package arrived, oversized, wrapped in plastic, with designer branding all over it. A rug, imported, over $700. She asked me to help roll up the old one. "We're elevating now," she said. Minimalist but warm, soft but grounded. She parroted Pinterest quotes like scripture. As we lifted the rug, I noticed something wedged beneath it. A family photo. My wife, me, her, at age 5, at the beach. The corner was bent, the frame cracked. "Oh, I forgot that was under there," she muttered. "Just toss it." I didn't. I wrapped it in a towel and took it to the basement. Later that night, I unwrapped it and placed it against the wall near my mattress. It wasn't just a photo. It was a reminder of a time before this performance, before the curated life and the rejection of her roots. It reminded me she hadn't always been like this. Once she'd cried when I left for business trips. Once she'd drawn me pictures that said, "Best dad ever." I held on to that thought. Friday was a storm. Not rain, not thunder, chaos. She lost a brand partnership due to a delayed post. She screamed into the phone, slammed her laptop, and threw a glass against the kitchen cabinet. I stood at the top of the stairs, watching. She didn't know I was there. "Nothing works in this house," she shouted. "Everyone's against me. I do everything alone." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Alone? I paid the bills, repaired the leaks, cooked, cleaned, raised her daughter, and I was invisible. That night, she posted a reel about resilience. "Sometimes life throws lemons," she said into the camera, "but I make lemonade." I sat downstairs in the dark, wondering what kind of lemonade needed a father's silence as its secret ingredient. On Saturday, she hosted a dinner. Influencer friends, wine, candles. She asked me to stay downstairs, Just for a few hours. It's a vibe thing. A vibe thing. I wasn't part of her aesthetic. I was the dust behind the curtain. I complied. But as I lay in the dark basement, listening to laughter upstairs, I remembered a time when that laughter belonged to us. When family dinners were filled with warmth, not performance. When gratitude was spoken out loud, not typed for engagement. Sunday morning, she came down. "The dishwasher's leaking again," she said. No good morning. No apology for locking me out of my own living room the night before. Just another problem to solve. I followed her up. Diagnosed it. A loose clamp. I fixed it in 10 minutes. As I closed the panel, she handed me a list. Another one. "This week's tasks," she said. "We're filming a home tour, so everything needs to be perfect." I read the list. It was longer, more specific, more demanding. "And please make yourself scarce between 2 and 4 on Thursday," she added. "We need clean visuals." I nodded, took the list, went back downstairs. That night, I added something new to the ledger. Not a task, not an insult, a line, just one sentence. "She no longer sees me." And once that sentence appeared, I realized I no longer needed to be seen to act. I just needed to be ready. Monday arrived without sunlight. The sky was gray, and the house felt heavier than usual. She passed me in the hallway without a glance, her arms full of folded linens. "Can you vacuum the stairs?" she asked. No good morning, no acknowledgement, just instructions. I nodded, as I always did, but I didn't vacuum. I sat on the bottom step for an hour, staring at each thread in the carpet, remembering how many steps it took to raise a daughter. How many stairs I'd carried her up when she was too tired to walk. Now those same steps carried nothing but silence. That evening, she announced they were going away for the weekend, a content retreat in Asheville with other creators. "You'll watch Murphy, right?" she said while packing a suitcase. She didn't wait for an answer. She never did. I watched as she packed 5 different outfits for a 2-day trip. All beige, linen, curated for the lens. She booked a pet sitter for the dog, a stranger from an app. I wasn't offended. I was fascinated. She'd rather trust a complete stranger with her dog than leave it with the man who raised her. She didn't ask me to feed the dog, just the child. Because in her mind, one was replaceable, the other was duty. I said nothing. I just marked the dates in my ledger. Thursday evening, she left. Murphy hugged me twice. She whispered, "Can we go to the park tomorrow?" I said yes. We watched movies, ate popcorn. She fell asleep curled into my arm like she used to when she was smaller. The next day, I found her ballet slippers in the laundry, torn. I stitched them by hand. Saturday morning, we baked. She told me a story she'd made up. It was about a grandpa who built a treehouse so high it touched the clouds. He lived there and watched the world from above, only coming down when someone was kind. I asked her how the story ended. She said, "The world got quiet." Sunday, my daughter returned, tired, restless. She didn't ask how Murphy was. She just asked, "Did the plant guy come?" I said yes. She scrolled her phone. Good. I need those succulents looking fresh for Monday's shoot. That evening, I reheated dinner for them both. She sat across from me at the table. Her phone buzzed 3 times. She laughed at something on the screen. I noticed her fork was on the wrong side of the plate. Years ago, I would have moved it for her. Now, I just stared at it. She looked up and said, "You okay?" I nodded. "Tired." "You should rest," she replied. "You're not getting younger." And that was it. Her version of concern, wrapped in a backhanded reminder of my fading use. I excused myself, returned to the basement. That night, I finalized everything. The documents, the letters, the transfer details. My notebook was full. 17 pages of dates, quotes, expenses, and screenshots. I had even printed her Instagram captions. Raising myself. Built this alone. No one handed me anything. The irony wasn't funny anymore. It was sad. But sadness had no place in revenge. Only clarity. Monday morning came with rain. Soft, steady, and without apology. She knocked on my door, not to ask, but to assign. The sink's acting up again, and the gate won't close properly. Could you take care of it today? I looked up from my notebook. Sure, I said. She smiled faintly. Thanks, Dad. It was the first time she'd called me that in weeks, maybe months. It didn't land the way she hoped. Some words are too late to matter. I fixed the gate, not because she asked, but because Murphy liked it closed. I adjusted the sink, tightened the hinge. Then I returned downstairs, sat on the edge of the bed, stared at the wall for 2 hours. At noon, I opened the drawer, took out the envelope, the one with her name on it, placed it beside my wallet. My hand trembled, not from fear, from finality, from knowing that the chapter was about to turn without warning. At 2 p.m., she had a video call. I heard her laugh from upstairs, pitched, performative. Yes, the house is all mine, she said. Family doesn't live here, just me and Murphy. I wrote down the timestamp. I printed it later. That night, she left a note on the fridge. Can you take Murphy to school tomorrow? I've got a podcast interview. I nodded to no one. It didn't matter anymore. At 3 a.m., I was still awake. The rain had stopped, but the silence was louder than ever. I got up, walked to the garage, looked at the boxes of memories she said she'd go through someday. I opened one, pulled out an old Father's Day card. She was 6. Her handwriting looped like vines. You are my favorite forever. I put it back. That version of her no longer lived here. Tuesday morning, she didn't speak. She left early. Her car peeled out before sunrise. I made breakfast for Murphy, braided her hair, walked her to school. On the way back, I passed the florist, bought lilies. Not for her, for myself. I placed them on my desk, let them bloom in silence. That afternoon, I sat in the living room while she filmed. She didn't ask me to move, didn't even notice I was there. She walked through the frame twice, fluffed the pillows, repeated a line. I made this space for peace. I said nothing. When she turned off the camera, she saw me, startled. Oh, didn't see you there. I smiled. That's okay, I wasn't here. She blinked, unsure if it was a joke. I got up, returned downstairs. It was the last time she'd ever not see me. Wednesday morning arrived like any other. Murphy was already dressed for school, backpack on, hair in a neat braid. She kissed me on the cheek and ran to the door. My daughter called from upstairs. Can you grab the rent envelope? Landlord's coming at 10. Her voice was casual, flat, not a single note of concern. I opened the drawer by the door where she always left it. Empty. No check, no envelope, no rent. That was my cue. I poured myself coffee, sat at the kitchen table. At 9:52 a.m., a knock at the door. She looked up from her phone. Can you get that? I didn't move. She rolled her eyes and went to open it. What she saw on the other side of that door didn't register at first. She blinked, confused, then angry, then pale. It wasn't some stranger in a suit. It wasn't a property manager. It was me, standing outside, holding a clipboard, a legal envelope in hand. I looked past her. May I come in? I said, like a stranger. She stepped back, slowly, as if pushed by something invisible. What are you doing? She stammered. I walked in, calm, measured. The same way I'd walked through this house 1,000 times, but now every step echoed louder. I set the envelope on the kitchen counter. Your lease, I said, is up. Her mouth opened. No words came. You're the landlord? She finally whispered. I nodded once. For the last 3 years. Her face twisted in disbelief. Why didn't you say anything? I looked at her, really looked at her, and said, You never asked. She picked up the envelope like it burned. Inside, 30-day notice. Official, filed, signed. She flipped through the pages in silence. You're evicting me? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I had already said everything I ever would. In action. In silence. in the 17 pages of records I'd kept since the day she told me the guest room was for the dog. She dropped the envelope on the counter. "You can't do this. I have a life here." I raised my eyebrows. "Yes, a curated one. Filtered. But not real. And certainly not yours." She looked around as if the house had suddenly become foreign. "You said nothing. All this time." "You said enough for both of us," I replied. "I just listened." Her eyes darted to the hallway. "Where's Murphy?" "At school. Safe. She'll stay with me until you figure out what's next." She stepped forward. "You can't take her from me." I didn't flinch. "I'm not. You gave her away the moment you forgot what being a parent means." The silence in that kitchen was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. Not even her breathing. Just the clock ticking. Just the house finally standing up for itself. She sank into a chair, legs folding like wet paper. "So what happens now?" she asked. I stood tall. "Now? You pack. You plan. You do what adults do when they face consequences." She shook her head. "I can't afford this." I looked at the fridge, at the designer rug, the camera on the tripod. "You can afford what you prioritize." I turned to leave. She called out, "Where will I go?" I stopped at the door. "The basement is available," I said, without turning. "Unless the dog's still using it." I walked out into the sunlight, calm as the morning. The birds chirped. The wind moved through the trees. And behind me, for the first time, the house finally exhaled. For the first 2 days, she didn't leave her room. The blinds stayed shut. The house, once echoing with her carefully placed affirmations and morning gratitude rituals, was silent. No incense, no filtered sunrays, no carefully filmed smoothie pours. Just quiet. Murphy stayed with me. I kept her routine exactly the same. We still braided her hair, still packed her snack bag with a note, still walked hand in hand past the rose hedge she liked to count. She didn't ask where her mother was, not once. Children know when something is broken, but they also know who will hold them while it heals. On Friday, I heard her come down the stairs. Her steps were slow, hesitant. She walked into the kitchen like a guest in a museum, unsure what she was allowed to touch. She didn't speak. She just opened the fridge, poured water, and sat at the table. I nodded once. That was all. No confrontation. No lecture. Just air between us. She stared at her glass for a long time, then finally whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually do it." I didn't respond, because it was never about doing it. It was about what she made me become to survive here. I got up, placed a letter on the table. It wasn't another legal document, just a printed list, dates, quotes, receipts, the final record of every insult disguised as normal. "That's yours," I said, "so you don't forget what silence remembers." She didn't read it, just stared at the last line. The date of the first insult. April 4th. "This room is for the dog." She folded the paper, not out of shame, but understanding. Finally. That evening, I watched her begin packing, not in a hurry, not in anger. She folded her clothes like a person who understood what was ending. Carefully, quietly, like someone folding an apology into each crease. Murphy sat on the couch beside me, coloring. She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She only asked, "Will we still have pancakes on Sundays?" I smiled. Every Sunday. On the third day, my daughter asked if she could borrow my truck. "Just to move the big stuff," she said. I handed her the keys. No words. The engine started, then stopped. She came back inside and stood at the door. "Thank you," she said. It wasn't for the truck. We both knew that. It was for not yelling, for not fighting, for leaving the door open, even as I stepped through it. That night, she slept on the couch. The next morning, she left. No suitcase, just her phone and keys. She texted me 4 hours later. "I'm okay." I didn't reply. Some messages don't require echo, just receipt. For the next week, I walked Murphy to school alone. The house grew quiet in a different way, not sad, just steady. I cleaned the upstairs bathroom, dusted the plants, opened the windows wide, let the sunlight pour into every room she'd once closed off. The air smelled like beginning. On Sunday, Murphy and I made pancakes. She insisted on extra syrup. We ate at the kitchen island, not at the dining table that once staged all those family breakfasts that were never real. She looked up at me and said, "I like it better like this." I nodded. So did I. That afternoon, I walked into the room where the dog once slept. I opened the window. A breeze passed through. I sat on the edge of the bed. The very bed she once said was for an animal. It no longer felt like exile. It felt like closure. I stood up, grabbed the old blanket she had tossed me that night, and folded it. Not out of duty, but because it was mine now. I placed it in the linen closet. Then, slowly, I turned off the light, closed the door. And this time, it wasn't me who was being shut out. It was the past. Some endings don't need ceremony. They arrive like the tide, slow, quiet, and absolute. A week after she left, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in handwriting I hadn't seen since she was 17. Inside, a single sentence. I didn't know what home was until I lost it. I read it once, then again. I didn't cry. Not because I didn't feel anything, but because I'd already done all my grieving in silence, on nights when the pipes creaked above my head and the basement light flickered against a damp wall. That grief was old. This was something else. This was acceptance. I placed the note in the same folder where I had kept the rent receipts and eviction records. Not out of spite, out of truth. Every part of the story belonged together now. One arc, one beginning and end. The following Monday, I painted the guest room. Soft green, the color Murphy liked. I let her choose the curtains. She picked yellow with little birds on the edges. "So the sun can come in," she said, "but not all the way." That made me smile. She slept in that room for the first time that night. The same room that once wasn't even mine. I tucked her in. She asked, "Will Mommy come back?" I kissed her forehead and said, "Maybe, if she learns how to knock." Murphy didn't respond. She just rolled over and hugged her stuffed rabbit. The next morning, I made coffee and stood at the front window, watching the street. A woman jogged past. A mail truck idled at the corner. Life continued, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel behind it. I felt inside it, present. I went out to the front steps and swept the leaves, fed the dog, changed the light bulb in the porch lamp. These were the small acts that kept a home breathing. Not expensive things, not perfect meals, just presence. Later that day, Murphy helped me label boxes for donations. We found old pictures in one, photos of her mother as a girl. She held one up and said, "She used to smile a lot." I nodded. People forget how. Murphy placed it in a separate box marked Keep. I let her decide. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. Just a photo, a small apartment, a mattress on the floor, one folded blanket. No caption. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, but because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stay silent. That night, as I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I passed the guest room. The door was ajar. Inside, Murphy slept soundly. I paused, watched her chest rise and fall, then quietly pulled the door closed. The house didn't creak that night. The wind didn't howl. Everything was still. And for the first time since my wife's funeral, so was I.